Good evening all, and welcome. I have some big news. My brother, who has a channel called History Profiles, is back. He was on a hiatus for a little bit, but he's back and has lots of content in store coming every week. It would really mean a lot to me if you would check out his first comeback video. He's got 5 videos already prepared and waiting to be uploaded, so it's going to be a regular thing. We're all really excited for this, and it would mean a lot if you could check it out. The link's in the description, as well as at the end of the video. It would really mean the world to me, and I'd love you forever. Thanks, guys. But for now, it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. I was 14 years old when I had to live with my grandparents. I had to live with them because my sister was in college and my parents were divorced. They lived in this old bungalow-type house. It was 1 story, and we have stairs that immediately go up to the attic. An attic which no one really uses. We just put stuff in there. It's too hot and stuffy up there anyway. The sole window up there didn't really help. The attic had an old, creaky wooden floor that I remember that I had to polish with a coconut shell, because that's how we do it here in the Philippines. That, and my grandparents are very traditional. The door to my room was near the stairs leading up to the attic. Like, you open my door and then face right, and the stairs would be immediately there. I hated that every time I left my room, I would see them, because it's almost like I would expect something to crawl down from there. One night, my grandparents had to pick up my aunt's family from the airport, but because of the hellish traffic here, they had to leave at 7 p.m, and their expected arrival back home would be around 5 a.m. at most. So, as a 14-year-old girl being home alone at night, I told them that I would be safe and fine. We live in a gated community, and we have plenty of guard dogs, so everything would be okay, or so I thought. Before they left, we already had dinner, so I was stuck with cleaning the dishes and all of that. Whilst I was cleaning them, I could hear a bunch of neighboring dogs barking. It didn't really bother me, because they're dogs, they always bark. Once I was done, I locked every door and window and turned off all the lights before heading to bed. As I got into my room, the lights were on and everything looked normal. My anime posters were on the walls, my closet was untouched, my bed was next to my barred tinted windows that we had to tint because I was on the first floor, and my grandparents wanted to make sure no one would peep into a young girl's room. They were barred too because my uncle, who used the room, always escaped through there to get to parties, and this was my grandparents' solution to that. Of course, they never got them removed. Nothing was out of place to alarm me. Everything was normal. That is until I turned off the lights. As soon as I hit the switch, a silhouette of a man was illuminated by the streetlight outside. He appeared to have thick curly hair, a skinny build, and I thought that I was having a hallucination. I turned the lights on again and he was gone, and then I flipped the switch once more to reveal him once again. I sighed in relief. I obviously was just tricking myself, or perhaps something else was casting a shadow. I double-locked my door to be safe, one with a doorknob lock and one of those door latch type locks, and tucked myself in. It was hard to fall asleep because of all the dogs barking outside. They weren't our dogs, it was the neighbors. But I was finally falling asleep when I heard something move from above me. Something in the attic. I pushed the thought to the back of my mind that I must be tricking myself, and I hugged my pillow, trying to tell myself that it was just rats. These rats seemed heavy. They were also pushing my furniture around. My heart sank when I heard them hurriedly go down the stairs and stop at the bottom. I covered myself with my blanket and I waited for something. I was also wishing that my parents had given me a phone, but I waited with bated breath. Suddenly I heard my doorknob being gently fiddled. I wanted to vomit when I heard a click, followed by a quiet turn of the knob. The knob turned but didn't budge. When they noticed, they tried to push it. This time I had finally stood up, shaking. I was a kid, home alone with no phone, no means of defense. All that was saving me was this thick door from the old days. I softly pushed my body up against the door and locked everything up again. I didn't want to make a sound and didn't want to scream and didn't want him to know I was there. I don't know why he stopped, but he did. I didn't get back to bed though. I sat there at the door waiting. It felt like forever. I heard footsteps ascend the stairs, but I was just still sat there. I saw something move from the corner of my eye. There, out the window, the shadow was back. I forced myself not to look, and all I could think of was thank goodness they were barred. I don't remember what happened after that. I think I probably passed out from exhaustion, or was just so scared that I fell asleep. Either way, I remember the next day when my family and I were finally having breakfast, and I casually brought it up with my grandfather that I thought I heard footsteps in the attic last night. My grandmother scoffed. It's probably rats. I never brought it up again. I didn't want them to worry. It probably was. Right? Our dogs were caged up near the gate and were far from my room, so they wouldn't have seen anything. The only dogs who could have been near my room, via proximity, were of course the neighbors. There was also nothing outside my window that could cast a shadow to look like a man. And lastly, the attic window, when I investigated, was propped open. This happened to a friend of mine who lived in the same neighborhood as me when we were about 8 to 9 years old. My friend Emily and her family lived just a few houses down the street from mine. We lived in a neighborhood where almost everyone knew each other. The biggest worry we had was that some outsider would come into the neighborhood and cause trouble. Some people even left their homes unlocked because they felt that safe. There was an incredibly nice family that lived directly across the street from Emily's house. A mum, a dad, and a 16-year-old son, and their other, mentally challenged son who was 22 years old, called Tim. Tim was always home, because he wasn't employed due to his disability. But his parents were working full-time, and his brother had school. All day, every day, he would be outside, waving and smiling at anyone who drove or walked by. Big smiles, showing all his teeth and sometimes giggling, just out of the pure excitement and happiness of interacting with other people, since he spent most of his time alone. He was not creepy. One day, Emily was sick and didn't go to school. Even though she was only about 8 or 9 years old, Emily was allowed to stay home sick by herself. Plus her mum was going to be home around 2 anyway, since she only worked part-time and the neighborhood was safe. Right? Emily locked all the doors except the one that led to the garage. They used this as their front door because it was an easier way to access the home. You just park your car in the garage and go through the side door. This is obviously not the safest way to protect your home from intruders, but we literally all did it. As if a flimsy garage door could keep anyone from getting in if they wanted to. The worst part is that they had an outside cat and kept the garage door cracked just enough for him to get inside for his food and shelter if he needed it. So Emily's asleep, feeling sick with a fever. All the doors and windows are locked, except the door leading to the cracked garage door. Tim was bound to know she was home alone, since he was outside the front of his house the whole time. Emily wakes up to a pounding on the front door. Startled, she walks downstairs and looks through the peephole. It's Tim. She cracks the door, and he says something along the lines of how he notices everything and would guard her home since she's home alone. She says thanks, but there was no need, and to have a good day. It was beautiful weather. He got angry. You think I can't do it because I'm dumb? But watch and see because I'm not dumb. She apologized and didn't mean it like that, but that she had to rest now. She dozed off and woke up to a noise downstairs in the kitchen, which happened to be the room the door from the garage led to. She hadn't heard the garage door open, but she was sick, so she figured she was in a deep sleep and simply hadn't noticed. Being completely disoriented from time, she looked over at the alarm clock. It was only 10:20, far too early for her mother to be home. At that moment she heard the noise again. She didn't call out. She had been sleeping in her parents' bedroom and ran into the bathroom, slamming the door loudly. She then remembered that this particular bathroom door did not have a lock on it. The noise she made slamming the door alerted the intruder to where in the house she was, and the big footsteps started to ascend. She moved quickly and quietly to her parents' closet, which was on the other side of the room. She closed the door and hid behind some clothes, all the time thinking how someone would have gotten inside. She remembered that the garage door was cracked for the cat, slightly, but not close enough for a thin person to slip underneath. Tim walks into the bedroom. Tim is tall and thin, and she can see him through the slatted closed doors. She sees him holding a weapon, and did everything she could not to scream. The sheen of it made her panic. He quickly went to the master bathroom where she was just moments before. These cookie-cutter houses only had about 3 floor plan layouts, so it wasn't hard for him to find. He looked inside the bathroom and didn't see her, then started making loud, throaty noises like someone would if they were frustrated or angry. While pacing the entire house, she stayed in the closet for hours, even after she heard him exit through the front door. She stayed there until her mother got home. She was crying hysterically and told her mother what happened. Had she not been so upset, and had one of their kitchen knives not been left by the front door, her mum might have blamed it on being delirious from a high fever, because no one would expect Tim to do that. The police were called and an official report was filed. I'm not sure if he had any charges pressed against him, because after she told me the story once, she refused to talk about it again. I overheard her parents a few times talking about the situation to my own parents, but never heard what the consequences were. Emily was so traumatized she went to therapy afterwards for several years, and still wouldn't talk to anyone about it because she didn't want to remember nor relive the experience. We even moved into an apartment together years and years later for college purposes. She never talked about Tim. It was like he never existed, and I never asked. I noticed she always locked the front door, which you should, of course, and the one that led to the patio and balcony, even though we were on the 7th floor, and always locked her bedroom door, to which she added an additional lock. And when she locked all of these doors and windows, she would always check 3 times, every single one. I often wonder if there was more to the story that Emily wanted to tell me. We were kids after all, and sometimes kids don't know how to explain the things they don't understand. It's terrifying to think about what his intentions were, and if he perhaps did find Emily, and something else happened. As horrifying as the experience must have been for her, it made a huge statement in the neighborhood for everyone to be more careful. I will always make sure everything is locked. I'm 22 years old and 5'1", or at least I was when this following event took place. I'm not a very intimidating person. I work as a kindergarten teacher, and I would meet parents and other family members all the time. I've made extremely good relationships with all my students, and good impressions on their caretakers. One day, about a month ago, we got a new transfer student from another school on the other side of town. Right off the bat, I hated his dad. He was creepy and would always look at me with a certain look. I brushed it off at first because I've had male caretakers hit on me before since I was single at the time. The child was weird. He would bully kids in the strangest way. He would tell kids that he wanted to do really horrific things to them, which, in turn, led to a conference with the dad and child after school, and he didn't seem angry or uncomfortable like I would assume most parents to be. He just wore a small smile like he was trying to hide his pride. He never took his eyes off my mouth, and it made me extremely uncomfortable. We terminated the conference and agreed he would not have recess for a week. Months went by. I got a boyfriend, and we were walking in an outdoor shopping mall on a date when I felt eyes on us, like eyes burning into the back of my head. We walked into a furniture store and my boyfriend looked so uncomfortable. "There's a man that's been following us. Let's go," he whispered to me. I didn't say anything, but he knew I agreed. We left the store, and he wrapped his arm around my hip. "Miss Kay," I heard behind me. I turned around, and it was the child and the dad. "We saw you walking and thought we'd come say hi," he smirks. He looks at my boyfriend and glares at him. He's 6'3" and has the build of a Viking, but is extremely fit, beard and all. He could be considered extremely intimidating, but he's just one big teddy bear. John. "This is John, my husband," I smiled. I lied about it because I knew that if some guys hear the word husband, they back off. The dad seemed very put off by this, like he was going to attack him. We awkwardly spoke for a moment and then left and drove home. 4 years later, John and I did get married. We moved to a new home, and it had many windows and was gorgeous. We had put metal stoppers on the windows because we didn't trust people, even though it was a fairly nice neighborhood. John and I one day were spring cleaning when we felt like someone was watching us. John was next to me washing the top of the fridge, and I instinctively looked out the window to see a car across the street. I asked John if he knew who it could be, and he said no, and closed the blinds, being a bit creeped out by it. That night we were falling asleep on the couch, and in the living room we had 2 extremely large windows that faced the backyard. John had already fallen asleep, and I was still watching TV when I heard a weird metallic tapping on the glass. I played it off and used my peripherals to look out the window, and caught a glimpse of a shadow passing by. It was at this point that I awoke John. I told him someone was at the window and thanked God for my great taste in men. He used to be a police officer and, even till now, is a firefighter. We keep a crowbar next to the front door and a metal bat behind the couch. He grabs the bat, hands it to me, and he slowly walks around to the dining room, and under the table is a firearm which he keeps for emergencies. I dialed 911 and heard John run out the front door quickly. "I am armed, and have no problem with hurting you," he yells, since it's like 1:15 in the morning and couldn't get the license plate. We filed a report, and the cops who came knew John and said they would have someone patrol the house for a week or so. Fast forward a month-ish later, we were in bed, and I happened to need to pee at 3 in the morning. I came out the bathroom and felt someone grab my face. I had no fighting experience whatsoever, so didn't even know how to defend myself. The bathroom door swings in, and there's a towel bar behind it, so when the door is hit, it's super loud. So I slammed my arm against the door, and John is a very light sleeper, and I was praying he would hear it. I felt really drowsy, and felt the person dragging me, and woke up in the hospital and saw John in the chair next to me. I asked him what happened, and he said he grabbed the metal pipe from under the bed and attacked the man. He shattered his jaw and broke both his knees. When the man was unconscious, John turned on the light to see it was the dad. He called the police, and I'm apparently mildly allergic to chloroform. To this day, we have no idea how he got into the house. The front and back doors have glass, so we lock the glass and the main doors before going to bed. We never open the windows further than the guards, and there are screens on them too. There was no sign of forced entry and no fingerprint anywhere from the guy. Now, I'm putting my doctorate to good use and teaching at the university. They're much more tolerable, and I feel safer since the university is simply a few blocks away from the fire station. To that kid, I hope you grow out of this weird sadistic phase, and to the dad, I hope you rot in jail, and that we never meet again. When I was 14, I had an appointment at a bank with my mum. She wanted to set up an account for me. So one afternoon we were downtown in the bank building, and I remember feeling really bored by the whole process. It was that kind of dry financial stuff, and I would rather stay home and play video games or something. My mum noticed after a few minutes, and then confirmed with the bank employee that I was actually just needing to sign the papers in the end, and for everything else I didn't really need to be there. We were already downtown, and my mum gave me a bit of money and told me to buy myself new clothes. I did not care about my appearance at all back then, and always looked kind of slobbish. The whole thing would take about an hour, so it would be fine if I were back by then. I went to the mall first, since I knew there were some cheap stores. While I was browsing some clothes, I noticed an older man around 60. That wasn't anything creepy or remarkable. I just thought he was weird, seeing someone that age in a store that is predominantly for young people. I then noticed that this guy kept appearing at stores I was at in the mall, almost like he was following me. I shrugged it off at first, but then I realized he actually was. I even tried to make a little game out of it, and it soon became clear he would always go into or near the stores which I entered. Now I was a naive boy. Besides from the fact that he was following me, there was nothing weird to this old man at all, so I couldn't even have imagined his actual intentions. I just thought he was some bored geezer who liked to play shop detective in his free time, and maybe he mistakenly thought I had stolen something when I was in the first store. Yep, I was pretty dumb back then. When I left the mall, the guy still followed me through the city. I wasn't scared, just slightly irritated, but I chose to ignore him for the time being and just take care of the shopping. When I entered the next store, he didn't seem to follow me at first, but then while I was choosing some clothes in the upper level, I noticed him again a few shelves away. I went to the changing room to try on some of the stuff I bought, and that's when I heard slow steps approach the booth I was in. I knew it was him, and thought it was kind of creepy, but still didn't fully grasp what was going on. He didn't linger there too long, but he remained at the store, which I left after deciding not to buy anything. At this point I'd had enough. After leaving the building, I immediately hid behind one of the pillars that led to the entrance. I saw him exit the store and look for me, but he didn't notice me and went away. I thought I was rid of him. The problem was the bank building where my mother waited was in the same direction that the stalker just went. I decided it would be safer to wait a bit, so I went into the McDonald's opposite of the clothing store and got myself a burger. And then, while I was eating outside of the McDonald's, the guy actually came back. At this point, I had had enough. It was obvious the guy wasn't any kind of shop detective, so what the hell did he want? I was really annoyed at him for following me and creeping me out, but I also was kind of curious what his deal was. What I did next, please, never do this. I would have never have done it had I known what he wanted. I lured him away. At the end of the street there was this nice breakfast place, which closes in the afternoon. So, At that time, there weren't any people near the benches and chairs in the front place. I sat down on one of the benches and nervously played around with my MP3 player. I knew what I was doing was dangerous, but my curiosity got the better of me, and as weird as it may sound, I felt also kind of thrilled. It didn't take long for the stalker to sit down on the bench opposite me. He didn't introduce himself or ask my name. He just started some small talk and told me he's not from here, but I looked like I could show him around. This still felt really weird to me, but I was kind of relieved as he didn't come off as a bad guy, which is dumb on my part. I told him politely I didn't have time, since I had to go back soon to see my mum. He asked if I had enough time to show him just one place, the park. I asked him which park he wanted to go to, but he replied that any park would do. Something really started to feel off here. Lucky there was one nearby that was really easy to find, so I started explaining the directions to him, but he interrupted me, saying he wanted me to take him there personally. I agreed and started to lead the way, but as we were walking, and neither of us said anything, I slowly realized what was happening. I froze in place, and he turned back and looked at me, asking if I did not want to go to the park with him anymore. I panicked and screamed no, which caused a lot of people to turn towards us, as this was happening in a very busy place. He just said, bye, and left, while I immediately ran back to the bank building to tell my mum what happened. She was still speaking with the bank employee from before. My mum got angry and told me if anyone ever tries to do that again, I should kick them down, which is really questionable advice to give a child, but that's kind of how my mum shows support. In any case, strange creepy dude with bad intentions. Let's not meet again. At the time of this story I was 17 and was living for a few years in a small house with my mum after my parents' divorce 6 years ago. The house wasn't huge, but we had one floor with our bedrooms and a small garden. We also have a dog who isn't really scary. It's one of those small dogs with a lot of hair. His biggest default is that he barks a lot during the day every time someone is close, near the garden perhaps. That annoyed me and the neighbors a lot. It's important to note that my dogs never bark at night and will always sleep in the bed with me. Anyway, one night, in the middle of the night, I had a dream where I heard a constant dog barking. In my dream, I felt like it lasted 1,000 years, but I think perhaps it only lasted a few seconds really. When I awoke from the nightmare, I didn't feel the weight of my dog on my feet. I felt like something was wrong, and then I realized my dog was actually barking and growling. I didn't understand what was happening. I just looked for my dog and saw him on the top of the stairs. His head turned towards the front door. The door opening on the garage was actually on the side of the front door. I jumped out of my bed and rushed to the top of the stairs where my dog was. There was a shadow of a man standing just near the bottom of the stairs next to the front door. I wasn't even able to shout. I just took my dog in my arms by reflex and ran towards my mother's room. My mother was just waking up. She takes medication for sleeping, so it's hard for her to wake up. Thank goodness the door of her bedroom can be locked with a key. Even though I was shaking like hell, I turned the key in the lock and locked the door. My mum understood what was happening when she heard the footsteps coming from the stairs. We froze in a corner of her bedroom, and she grabbed her cell phone to call police while we were trying to reach the cops. The guy started shaking the door handle and then punching the door. After a moment he stopped, and this psycho laughed. That's when my mum had the idea of shouting, "I called the police, get out." After a moment we heard him going down the stairs still laughing. We didn't dare move until we did hear the police officers. When they arrived, of course, no one was there. In the living room on the table, there was a note where he wrote, "See you soon." They said later that apparently the guy got in and out by way of the garage, which had a back door and was at the time always left open. Immediately after that, we went to live with my grandparents for a while and moved out to a new house some months later. We never heard of the guy again, but we always checked that every door was locked after going to bed, and I've had trouble sleeping ever since. For almost a year after, I would wake up at 4 a.m. just to make sure he hadn't found us and trying to sneak into our home once more. Lock your doors, people. I'm in my 40s and thought today about an incident that occurred to me in the mid-90s, 1997 to be exact. The pre-millennium days. In 1997, I was in the Army National Guard, enrolled in college, and also working a part-time job. I was also a single mother with a 4-year-old. I was struggling quite a bit, but always smiling and friendly. No one was a stranger. I was raised in a rural area, so that's just how most people were. I moved to a new apartment in the city about 5 miles from my father's home, so I felt quite safe. I had lived in my apartment about 3 weeks, when one morning, while getting ready to leave for class, I heard a loud knock on the door. I opened it without questioning who it was, and there was this massive guy that had to be at least 6'4" or more, and over 250 pounds. This guy was normal looking, very fit with a maintenance belt on. He tells me he was the maintenance guy and needed to look at my power box located in my room. I didn't know how he knew where to go, but I let him in, and it was at that point that a sense of terror washed over me, like a flood. I realized I had made a mistake. I was alone with this guy who went right back to my room. I remember wanting to sit and eat, but the terror felt so strong, I grabbed my backpack and rushed out to class. I was afraid to come home, but I didn't tell my dad. I didn't know what I was thinking. I came home alone late at night and looked under the beds and in my couch, and was relieved to find I was alone. I found a massive hole in my closet ceiling, large enough for a man to get through. A few days passed and I had convinced myself that maybe he was the maintenance man, and maybe I was paranoid for no reason. I went to the apartment manager and asked her when the maintenance man would be up to repair the hole in my ceiling. She grew pale and asked me to describe the man. She then informed me he wasn't the maintenance guy. The actual maintenance guy was an elderly gentleman who lived in the apartment below me. The hole was patched up, and I never, fortunately, saw the stranger again. The guy looked so normal, muscular, tall, and not bad looking, but obviously a person with ill intent. I looked up crimes where a man comes in posing as a maintenance man in the 90s, and there was a guy active from 85 to 98 in my state posing as a maintenance guy. He was caught and sent to prison, but I can't recall his name. Dude, I hope you're still locked up. I've always been borderline obsessive about locking my doors. I did it as a kid, and as a teenager I learned through experience that a locked door is at least a deterrent and could give someone warning that a person wants to illegally enter their space. It's something I'm known for. Even at social gatherings, I'll lock doors behind me when I come in without even thinking about it. I've heard the line, "Well, who the hell locked it?" followed by that flush of embarrassment because of course it was me, and now I have to say it. For over a decade I've done nightly checks because I can't sleep without doing so. Knowing this is a preface for my story and highlights how strange the situation is. I only just moved here recently, 5 months ago in fact, from a way more heavily populated place in my state. The house where we reside is set far back from any pavement road. separated by 2 dirt roads and 2 private driveways, as my rental is on another person's property. So you go down their private drive and off to the side is my private drive. And I've never even seen a pedestrian back there. Nice and very private. No one can even come here without explicit instructions, and often I still have to meet them down the road, as GPS places my house a few fields to the south of where it really is. This is paradise for people like me, who value their privacy and don't like having visitors without prior notice. The house is semi-surrounded by trees and brush, with a field on the other 2 sides. It took a bit of getting used to, the rurality of it, hearing coyotes often, sometimes cows screaming in the night, and the darkness of having no nearby source of light pollution, as the nearest town is 20 miles away. Another relevant tidbit: I don't sleep in a completely dark house. I always leave lights on in a common area, usually only one, but a light nevertheless. The back door leads off into the trees, but it didn't feel so creepy, as a few yards in, there's a 6-foot-tall wire fence laden with vines and offering a further modicum of privacy. No one uses the back door. There's really no reason to. A month in and I found myself locked out, and unfortunately I often lock the door handle on my way out of reflex. As my conscious mind is where the part I know if I have keys out or not, but my subconscious takes over when I'm distracted. I knew I had only locked the handle on the back door and figured I could just pop it to get in myself. I checked the door out and it was pristine, none of those minute scratches that are present when you take a flat metal object and pop the lock on a cheap door. I didn't want to damage it, so I swallowed my embarrassment and called the landlord, admitting that I had locked myself out and needed back in. He came and let me in, and I worked on being more mindful. A little more than a week later, I wake up thirsty. I walk groggily to the kitchen, and as soon as I open my bedroom door, I realize it's way darker than it should be. My ever-burning light is out. I wonder briefly if there's a power outage, but I can hear my fan behind me in the room. So, it can't be that. I take another step, and the hair stands up on the back of my neck. That feeling that someone's watching. Another step, and it's beyond feeling. It's conviction. I turn my head to the left, where instincts say the person is standing, and for a split second I'm relieved. No one's there. In the next instant, though, that relief abandons me, and I notice I can see stars where only darkness should be. My back door is wide open. I take 2 very fast steps backwards out of view of anything that could be in my backyard, knowing I'm responsible for more people's safety than just my own. I don't retreat for long, almost immediately stepping back further and forwards. I have to shut the door, of course. The entire path there, I just know someone's out there. In the dark, waiting until I'm close enough to snatch. I reach out into the pitch darkness for the knob, expecting to feel a hand close over mine at any second. After a moment of panic and driven fumbling, my hand makes contact with the knob, and I slam it shut. I go to turn the lock and find it still engaged. Maybe, just maybe this once, the door wasn't completely shut. Like maybe the latch hadn't fully engaged. The turned off light remained a mystery. Both of my boys said it wasn't them, and that's very believable because they've never done it before. Both of them like having the light on to find the bathroom and such, so I write it off as strange, but nothing else was amiss. It was just one of those things that never had a full explanation. From that point on, I put my weight onto the door any time I check or lock it, on my rare and occasional trips to the backyard. Life goes on, and I almost put it to the back of my mind. Almost. Until 3 weeks later. I wake from a nightmare. For the last 10 years, I haven't had a dream I can remember, but I do occasionally have nightmare clusters. Mouth dry, bladder throbbing. It was one of those bad ones where you wake up after making inarticulate sounds trying to scream from a sleep-paralyzed mouth. Deja vu. After my bathroom trip, I emerge into a dark kitchen. 2 steps in, there's someone watching. The door is wide open, a panicked quick retreat followed by a fear-fueled moment of bravery where I wash forward and close the door. Sure at every moment that I'm about to be torn out into the night and slaughtered. Strange. I know for sure the door didn't pop on in its own time. What's going on? My adrenaline finally crashes as I lay in bed after trying to figure this out. I've left my bedroom door open this time so I can hear any goings-on in the house, and I finally fall back asleep with 2 hours to spare before I have to get up. When I do, I wake my boys and I'm halfway to the coffee maker before I see it. The facing door is open again. This time no real feeling of being observed, lights still on in the kitchen. I do what I already should have done and check the door for a sign of tampering. There's new scratches and bend marks where the aluminium gave way to being pried. At least this means it's not a ghost. I don't really know what to do. Life goes on. 2 weeks after that, the chickens penned 30 feet or so from my bedroom window, crow long into the night. Even the hens are part of the show this time, with the hens making eerie little screams. It makes my sleep fitful, not very restful, and I wake up at 2 a.m. when my fan goes off. The power's out. Damn. I get up to use the latrine and to light a few kitchen candles to save on anyone needing to get up in the middle of the night while traversing the house in the dark. 2 steps in. Cue the hair on the back of my neck, and this time I can hear the crickets before I even turn my head. The door is of course open. After I survive another door shutting, I spend a lot of the time thinking about this. There was more damage, scratches and gauges in the jamb this morning. I try to rationalize how this can possibly be happening and can't think of anything that could possibly account for it. Any innocent reason I can attribute to it goes out the window when I remember this has never happened, even once in the daytime. I think maybe I missed the scratches, that they were already there and that my paranoid brain told me they were worse, which could be feasible, all except for the day I got locked out and remember it was in such good condition that I didn't even have the heart to pop the door myself. I decide to change the deadbolts around. The front door has a square cord lock, and the back has a sloping one that I'm honestly sure is actually backwards in the door. Work picks up. Life moves on. That night I'm exhausted. I can't find my Phillips head, so in the place of the locks I put an errant Christmas decoration adorned with bells to place on the door handle and go to sleep. It's never happened 2 nights in a row anyway. I even considered setting up a camera, but thought of the little fact in my musing. Plus I'm honestly scared to see what I would catch. For once, I'm early in bed. And as soon as my head hits the pillow, I'm asleep. Cue the nightmares. I wake up for the first time at midnight on the dot. Dark kitchen, back door open, scary as hell, and fall back asleep. Wake up at 1:30, door open. Wake up at 3, and to my enormous relief the door is closed and I fall back asleep, right into a nightmare. In this one I can hear Christmas bells. I come upon a little girl with her back turned to me, and in that weird nightmare logic, at first I'm not afraid of her and ask her what her name was, and she responds that someone's coming. She starts to get louder, and after a few more crescending repetitions, all the while Christmas bells going on in the background, she turns to me, jaw on her chest, mouth unnaturally wide, and screams that someone's here. I wake. It's 5, and a false dawn shines faintly through my window. I immediately get up. Of course the kitchen is dark and the door is open, but surprisingly, no feeling of being watched. I feel like the danger has passed, like gunsmoke in the air after the main event. I close the door, and to my absolute horror, find the Christmas bells laid neatly on the dryer, no longer attached to the door. I spoke to my boys that morning and asked them if they'd heard anything that night. My 13-year-old says nothing, except that he got up at 2:30 to pee and the back door was open, so he closed it. I asked him about the bells and he says he's pretty sure they were on the handle. I switched the locks. A few days ago there was more damage to the door, but so far, it's holding. This culminated in me getting cameras. I set them up, and there were more scratches on the door, like someone tried to pry the lock. But the camera picked up nothing, and doesn't have audio. 2 weeks after that, I left my bag in the car with my allergy meds and nasal spray, and woke up in the night because I couldn't breathe through my nose and I was getting a cold. I went out to get my medication, went into the carport and heard something. It sounded like a heavy bipedal animal. In the brush. I was scared. It was strange. "Hello? Is anyone out there?" I say, but there was just silence. I yelled again to no reply. For a solid minute I look, trying to will my eyes to see whatever's the cause of the noise, but see nothing, and turn to walk up the stairs when I'm confident I heard whatever or whoever it was bolt in the other direction. I'm quite positive it was a person. When I wake up, I check my driveway for dirt and there were footprints. But there were others among them from the crew who happened to work there the day before. This is getting very strange. Once I got to where the driveway met the dirt road, there was no way to trace where they had gone. And of course by then the prints had been obliterated by the tire tracks of early risers. As far as evidence goes, there wasn't much. I mean, it could have been there from the day before. After a month of peace, I was feeling pretty good. I didn't know why I had stopped all of a sudden, even if whoever was at the trees that night was the perpetrator. I doubt I scared them off. I was talking with my landlord one afternoon, as he lives nearby, and I see him often walk over. He's been pretty busy lately, not only with other social groups, but he's also been doing a lot of traveling. Our conversation meandered to the topic of the neighbors to my left. He was a strange one, but up until this point he seemed quite harmless. He spent most of his time in his house, and I thought at this point perhaps he had slight agoraphobia, as he rarely went anywhere and seemed to have most of his things delivered. I didn't know the guy well, but he wasn't super friendly. I would sometimes see him out in his robe and boxers on his porch or in his yard, and I would wave and he would never wave back, with the exception of once. My landlord told me in this conversation that he was quite sure this guy had a very outdated opinion on women. I had mentioned he never waved, and that's what he responded with. The reason he guessed he didn't. Here's the interesting point though. He said something to the effect of, "I don't think you'll have to worry about that anymore," as in his antisocial attitude, so of course I asked him why. He was of the opinion that his house was about to be foreclosed, and that he had made a run for it. Basically that he went to live with family or hooked a rental before the police showed up to formally evict. He wasn't sure though, it was just a hypothesis. I thought maybe he was on disability or something prior to this, as he never seemed to go to work, but he clearly had some way to pay his bills, or so I thought. I began to pay more attention, and I think my landlord's right. The sheriff's office showed up with papers one day, but as far as I've seen, no one came to the door. His yard isn't overgrown, but it's mostly shade covered with leaves. Besides, no one has to really cut their grass due to the weather. His house just feels empty. There's also a tent that's been set up in his backyard for 2 months. Some people don't take very good care of their things, but up until a few months ago, I wouldn't have thought that this was his character, as he did take care of his yard pretty well and kept all his tools properly housed. A good indicator would have been a vehicle, of course, but I've never seen one there to begin with. My leading hypothesis in my mind is that it's him. I can't speak for motive though. Maybe he was working himself up to do something worse. Perhaps he had some type of mental issue and the whole thing was some part of his plan I'll never understand. What I do know is that ever since that time, where I guess he took off, I have had 0 issues. I haven't come home to an empty house with the feeling that someone's just left. I haven't had very small things be misplaced. When I sworn up and down, it was no longer where I put it. No waking up in the night, swearing someone was staring at me only to look at my bedroom door and see pitch black house with a back door open. I didn't have any idea if he was gone, but there was a noticeable change in the atmosphere. It was subtle, but it was better. All I know is that I went from desperately wanting to move to getting pretty comfortable in my home again. I do like to think the most of people, but anyway, I'm pretty sure it's him. The only one thing that I will say is that I mentioned before there's a camera that sees part of my property that doesn't belong to me, and coincidentally the problems were occurring in the side of the yard the camera couldn't see, while a simple recon would show the camera for what it was quickly, as there was a red light on it, very visible at night. To an outsider, they'd immediately see the camera, and anyone breaking the law would be wary. A neighbor would know even better which the weak spots were, which is anything beyond the house's front. I was a high school student living with my mother in a third-floor apartment. I used to sleep in the living room because the apartment only had one bedroom, and it was my mum's. I was happy with that little space. I was a happy kid. I always got up at 6 a.m. to go to school, and my mum always got up at 5 a.m. to have a shower and make breakfast before dropping me off at school and heading to work. That morning I woke up and all the lights were on, every single one of them, even the one in my room. I went to grab my phone, and strangely enough it wasn't there. I headed to the bathroom and saw all the drawers and doors and the furniture was all open. I was deeply confused. Anyway, my mum came out the bathroom and asked me what the hell I'd been doing. I told her I didn't know what she was talking about, and that I thought she did it since she was always up earlier than me, and asked her if she'd seen my cell phone. Then I saw it. Deep inside her green eyes, the realization. I could see the fear. All the pieces inside her head clicking in place. She leapt to the kitchen and found the window wide open, a kitchen knife on the ground, and some dusty fingerprints on the wall where someone put weight to climb inside. It was then when my sleepy head put together the pieces. Someone somehow climbed all the way up our balcony, got inside our apartment and robbed us. All the while I was asleep in my bed right there in the living room. She hugged me and asked if I was okay. I said I never heard anything. Didn't even wake up when this unknown person turned the lights on and rummaged through our stuff. It was super weird. I have the lightest sleep since I have memory, and still do many years later. They don't dare to open my mum's bedroom door, so she didn't notice anything. My grandma says that some angel protected me in my sleep and that's why I didn't wake up, but I don't believe in that kind of stuff. I don't think they knew I was there either. The police never found the robber, and we put steel bars on the windows and moved anyway sometime after that. This happened when I was in high school. At least 6 years have passed, and my mother and I moved from the apartment. I'm now grown and living with my boyfriend, but until today I'm still paranoid and keep thinking why I didn't wake up, though I am grateful that I did not. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. I do hope that you have enjoyed tonight's tales. Certainly some creepy ones. Always be careful, lock your doors. You never know who might want to get in. As I said at the start, my brother has just relaunched his channel and I'm really excited. I really liked his first video, it was super interesting. It's on the inspiration for Captain Jack Sparrow. So yeah, I was really stoked. I really liked the video. I think he did really well. And of course it would mean a hell of a lot to me if you would check out his video and help him out. Not saying subscribe, I'm just saying give him a chance. Watch. That's all I'm asking. Alright then everyone, well thank you. Oh, here's the link. Give it a click, and hopefully I'll see you over there. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.